Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Johanna Richey. Hi, Johanna.
Hi, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being on again today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, we have a phenomenal guest today, one of the leaders in the profession in the surgical realm, Dr. Mark Hofbauer. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Hofbauer.
Thank you, Jeff. Happy to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Hofbauer, we're pretty informal on Dean's Chat, and if it's okay with you, let's go first names, Mark, Joe, and Jeff.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, for taking the time today. I know it's been a busy day, and if you want to talk about some of the fun things that you had going on today, we can certainly dive into it. But just to give a brief introduction, Mark Hofbauer graduated from the University of Washington Jefferson College, went on to do his Podiatric Medical school training with the Ohio School, and then did his residency program with West Penn, the program that I know a lot of our students are familiar with. You then also went on to do an AO Trauma Fellowship, which we're really excited to kind of get more information on, in 1992 in both Berlin as well as in Switzerland. Dr. Hofbauer is a well-known in our profession for being an incredible lecturer. Actually, Glenn Weinrob, just to put a little shout out for you, was just saying that the best ankle fracture lecture he's ever heard, you just gave at the ACFAS in Tampa this year. So, and again, every time I've heard you speak, Mark, you're a phenomenal educator, and not just from the perspective of talking at people. You have an amazing ability to bring people in and engage with them in such a way that is comfortable and familiar. And I've only gotten a couple opportunities to interact with you, and I feel like I've known you forever. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Joe. That's so nice. We didn't even write that up that nice. That's
I know.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So you're also a fellowship director.
Yes.
And so currently you are the fellowship director for the WVU Medicine Wheeling Hospital Foot and Ankle Advanced Surgical Fellowship in West Virginia.
Right.
And so one of the things we love to do on the podcast is highlight different opportunities for students and residents. Right. So could you start by talking a little bit about your program, your fellowship?
Yep, absolutely. So I started a fellowship probably about 15 years ago. And back then, I think I was like the fifth or sixth fellowship in ACFAS at the time. And it started, I was with an orthopedic group in the Pittsburgh area. And it just really took off and grew. And then when this opportunity came along about 2.5 years ago at WVU, I just couldn't pass it up. They agreed to bring the fellowship in, expand it, expand the pay, expand the benefits, and pretty much let me just do whatever I wanted with it, which was really, really nice. And actually, we are in the process, too. We just got our approval for the residency program because they want us to start a residency program here in West Virginia. And so we'll be starting that first class of residents in July of 25, actually.
Okay.
But the fellowship program, I mean, it's wonderful. The fellow spends all year with me. I think the fellow this year is going to end up with about 750 cases. And, for everything where we're at now at WVU, it's mostly a lot of revision work, a lot of rear foot fusions, and we do a lot of trauma. So today we had an Achilles tendon, we had a fifth med fracture and an ankle fracture. So we do a lot of trauma, but we got a lot of resources here too. We have excellent vascular, we have excellent trauma surgeon. And so I'm having the time of my life. I'm 61. I'm having more fun than I ever had. So it's been great. And every fellow I have had has just been a wonderful human being. They all have incredible jobs. And the one I have now is just amazing. Sheree is our fellow. She came from Long Island Jewish in New York. She already has a wonderful job with an orthopedic group outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. So it's just fun for me to watch these people come in and grow and then just do great things with their lives. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
I could definitely see that.
Mark, I have a question for you. Fellowships are a hot topic in the profession right now.
Yes.
Students are, projecting into the future, and, in their third or fourth year students, they're thinking about, okay, I'm going to do this 3-year surgical training program, then I hopefully will do a fellowship. Who are fellowships right for? I mean, is there options, right? If you get 3 years of training and you go out into practice, that's great. But Who should be looking at fellowship opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. So you know what? I think it has changed, right? Like over the last few years, maybe 5 or 6 years. So I personally think that if you're interested in doing the profession from a surgical standpoint, you should get as much possible training as you can. Because, an extra year when you're young doesn't really mean a thing, and you can learn so much more from it. And I think as we move forward, that piece of paper is going to be really, really important to determine like what kind of privileges that you have. And let's face it, right? I think every one of our goals, regardless of our age, has been to advance the science and advance the profession, right? So when I came through 30 some years ago, I had to go to Europe to do a fellowship because they didn't have fellowships for podiatrists. And now we probably have, 50 or 60 of them. So I think it's going to grow. But you're right. I don't think it is for everyone, right? So we still have a lot of people who come into the profession that want to do, primary care podiatry, or they want to do, wound care podiatry or things like that. Or maybe you come out of a 3-year program where you already have 1,500 cases. You really don't have an interest in teaching or doing university work. And maybe you just want to go to work for a practice in your hometown where you plan to do bunions and hammer toes, and you've already had a lot of that. Those people, I don't think, need to spend another year. But if you want to, do trauma, do total ankles, do a lot of revision work, you hope to someday teach or be part of a residency program, I think getting that certificate and that extra year of experience is wonderful. Because I'll tell you, it's just as much about the relationships that you make in that year, and the people that you meet. And I think, like in my fellowship, even though we do all these cases, the fellow always says at the end of the year, the clinical part was phenomenal because they're with me in the clinic too. So from beginning to end, soup to nuts, they know what to do with these patients so that when they get out, they're really, really prepared. So if you're looking at that kind of practice in your future, I think a fellowship is really the way to go. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit too about the process because again, being one of the first, small handful that were the American College of Foot and Ankle approved fellowship programs. Can you talk a little bit about that process and why that might be something that's useful for residents to be looking at when they are maybe looking at different opportunities for fellowship?
Yep, absolutely, Joe, because the other thing that's true is not all fellowships are the same, right? And so you do want to do your homework, right? Because you want to pick a fellowship that's right for you based on what you're trying to get, right? So if you are coming from a residency program where you're hoping to get a lot of trauma cases because you didn't maybe get that in a residency, then a program like ours would be good for you because we do a lot of that. And there are other fellowship programs that really don't do any trauma at all, right? Like they might just be focused on limb deformity or wound or whatever. So I think it's good to do your homework to figure out, like you don't want to do a fellowship just to do a fellowship, right? Because then you're just kind of wasting a year of your life. So yeah, I think talk to other people who have done the fellowships that you're interested in, go on the ACFAS website and take a look at what's being done, maybe ask to go visit that program. And, the ACFAS Fellows Breakfast every year is a wonderful place to go, even if you're maybe in just your first year of residency, or even if you're a student, right? You can go into that and meet the different residency directors and talk to them and see what they have to offer. Because just like picking a residency that's best for you, it's the same for fellowship. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mark, how far in advance do you start looking at residents to come into your program? I've heard they're interviewing in their second year now. And
yes. Yeah. You know what, Jeff, it's become crazy. It used to be that, we started interviewing maybe late in the summer and then we picked in October. But as there's more and more fellowships now and there's more competition, it's been going earlier and earlier. So you're right. We have heard now that some folks are picking, like they picked in November for the fellowship year 2 years from now. So that means people are just starting their second year, right? And I think that does those people a disservice, those residents, because they're still not really even sure. They're still trying to, figure out where they're at, what they want to do, and what they know, what they don't know. So I think the college has instituted a policy coming up that for the next academic year, I think it's like sometime in May, where we'll be allowed to start interviewing and offering to kids at that point. But for now, it's kind of like the wild, wild west, to be honest with you. And it's tough, right? Because some people may want a certain program and they get offered another program, and yet it's maybe not one that they want, but they take it anyway just because of the fear of not getting something. Okay. So that's kind of like what we're grappling with right now to try to make that process better. Yeah.
Has there been any talk of centralizing it, somewhat like what they did with Casper Cripp for residency interviews?
So there has been a little bit of that, Joe, and some of the groups have sort of interviewed at like one central location. So those of us that have programs in like Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio, we have thought about maybe meeting in Columbus and weekend in May, so that, you know, kids don't have to travel multiple times and get multiple hotels. Because you're taking them out of their residency program when they have to do that. And like, I'm in West Virginia, right? So somebody in Utah, that's a heck of a commitment to try to get to West Virginia. So we're trying to figure out how to streamline it. We really, as a group, we don't want to go the way of sort of the match, because that takes the personal component out of it. You know what I mean? And you want to make sure that you get a right fit for both the resident that's going to be a fellow and the fellowship director. So we're careful to try to not go that way, but I think we'll get there in the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, what are your thoughts on curriculum for fellowships going forward? I think it still has that, as you said, a wild, wild west feel to it as to what the experience is. Is there talk about not standardizing the application process, but standardizing some the curriculum, for example?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So when we, right now, you know, you're required to go to the ACFAS meeting if you're an ACFAS fellow. And when you're applying as a fellowship director for the program, you know, you have to send in what your plan is for academics, attendance, you know, checking monthly logs, all that. So there is some formality to it. But again, you know, I'm one of those people that really believe that education would solve all the world's problems. So for me, you know, like last year, I think my fellow maybe went to 9 different meetings across the country. So anytime somebody offers a meeting for fellows, you know, I let my fellow go, whether it be industry sponsored, whether it be, you know, maybe they'll say to me, you know, I feel like I'm a little bit weak in arthroscopy. Could I go do an arthroscopy course? And I really, really promote that and tell them to go as much as they can. So my fellow goes to all those meetings, ACFAS, anything they feel like they need more strength in. And then I always send the fellow to the Seattle Lower Extremity Surgical Symposium, because that's really, really an advanced seminar. And they tend to really like that. But then we do our academics as well. I'll be honest, we don't do as much of the journal club type of thing, because I've really already had a lot of that. Hopefully you have that before you get here. But you know, I love to talk at these different meetings, and the fellow is constantly helping me put my talks together. So there's really, believe it or not, a lot of academics that go into that, you know, because we're pulling articles, we're looking at cases, we're talking to people around the country. So that's a really, really big academic component of it too. And the truth there is that I'm usually not good at putting my own lecture together. That's why I need the fellow. I'm terrible at technology. Joe will tell you that.
You're collaborative, Mark. You're collaborative. Yeah. And actually in that vein, I think that's actually a really beautiful idea too. This fellowship kind of provides you this very personal educational opportunity. And I mean, you've lectured over 250 meetings at the minimum, I think. So you've had a numerous opportunity to lecture. And so having a fellow be able to get even just a little bit of a window into that. We talk a lot about mentors and mentorship. So having that opportunity to kind of see, do I like this? Is this an area that I want to get involved? And then how do I get involved? Seeing that from start to finish, I think is a really valuable opportunity. Yeah,
you're absolutely right, Joe. And I always have this rule that, you know, when the fellow leaves, they can take all of my lectures with them so that they have a base to be able to go on. And especially the ones where they've participated in the cases, right? But yeah, they do become sort of like my kids, if you will. On any given day, I think the other day, 4 of my previous fellows in one day called me just about questions about different cases, whatever. And so they are like kids to me. And And I have 3 daughters and 3 granddaughters, and I love to cook. So when they're over all the time, the fellows there a lot of times. So they're almost part of my immediate family. And it has to kind of be that way, right? If you're going to spend 15 hours a day for a year with someone every day, or 15 hours a day for a whole year, that's a lot of time. Yeah. So there's definitely a personal connection there. Yeah, but it's great. I really like it.
Yeah.
So,
Mark, that's such an incredible philosophy. Who were your mentors? Where did you get the foundation that you have today to keep giving back to the profession?
You know what, Jeff? I got to be one of the luckiest guys in the world. I'll tell you my story, how I got into this, and then I'll answer those questions for you.
Perfect.
When I was a sophomore in high school, my dad asked me if I had thought about what I was going to do with my life. And I told him, I said, yes, sir, I'm going to play middle linebacker for the Green Bay Packers. and my dad said to me, has it ever occurred to you that you've been 5'8" since the 8th grade? And I said, no, sir, I've never really thought about that. And he said, well, then what are you going to do? I said, well, then I'll just teach biology and coach football. And he said, that won't put food on the table. And so I didn't know. So my dad said, you got an uncle that's a doctor and an uncle that's a dentist. Why don't you do that? They seem to have a nice quality of life. And so I went to undergrad thinking I was going to be a dentist. And we had a chemistry professor who was in charge of the Pre-Health Society. And he was brilliant. He had invented Teflon, I believe. He taught for like $1 a year. He taught just because he wanted to. And he called me in one day. It was sophomore year at college at Washington Jefferson. And he said, Mr. Hofbauer, you want to be a dentist? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, you're not going to be a dentist. You're going to be a podiatrist. And I said, with all due respect, sir, what is that? Like, I didn't even know what a podiatrist was. And he sent me off for a month in January to the school in Philly. And I came back and I said, I'm hooked. And so I got in and I got OCPM at about the same time as folks like, Al Boyk and Gerard Yu and Pat Landers and, Larry Osher and all these brilliant people. I got so lucky to get an awesome education. And then I met a guy, Jim Marks, who was one of my mentors at one of the APMA meetings when I was like a sophomore or second year. And he introduced me to people. And then, then I got lucky again. I ended up at the Podiatry Hospital in Pittsburgh. While I was there, it went from a 2-year program to a 3-year program, and I got the 3rd year. Alan Catanzarite was my residency director. He was the one that thought it would be a great idea to do the AO fellowship. So he did that. And all kind of people in Pittsburgh at that time, back then the progressive stuff was being done in Pittsburgh, Atlanta, and Seattle. That was a long time ago. And so guys like, Carl Saltrick and Stan Bosta and Jim Marks and Katz, all these different people, Steve Connor, they just, Sam Mendocino, who was one of my mentors. I was just so lucky to be around all of these people. And then when I was part of the West Penn, part of the residency, there was a guy named E. Douglas Newton III, who was a very famous plastic surgeon, reconstructive surgeon. And I got to do 4 months with him. And that guy kind of changed my life. You know what I mean? He just taught me so much stuff. He treated me wonderfully. And then the fellowship, both when I was in Berlin, Germany, my mentor there was Professor Weber, who was president of the AO. And then I went to Interlaken, Switzerland, and there was a guy there named Bruno Nussberger who became president of the AO. So I just was a perfect storm for me. I just got all these wonderful people that helped me. So I've had an enormous number of mentors and wonderful people. I think that's why I just try to give back as much as I can. People have been really good to me.
Paying it forward.
Yep. So
that was really beautiful. And, as I was talking to Jeff about how excited I was for today, that's exactly just a little snippet in terms of just looking at life as a continuum and that there are so many facets. Yeah. So as we are talking sometimes to prospective students, I did not know you were pre-dental, so I think that's terribly fascinating. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the idea of being flexible or pivoting or being willing to embrace the unknown? What is your kind of take on some of that?
Yep. So I think the key is to never say no. I never say, like somebody asks me to speak at a meeting, I never say no. If somebody calls me, needs help with a case, I never say no. I think you got to be that way. I think too, that you got to really be grateful for what you have. I mean, Joe, I've had the most wonderful life in the world. I mean, because of this profession, I have been to 46 states. I don't know how many countries. I've seen the world, from China through Europe to Costa Rica. And it's just, I never say no. I always look for an opportunity. And I think, Katz always said, if you're good at what you do and you can just be nice to people, you always make a good living. And the other thing that really, really helped me was, Hodges Davis, who's a orthopedist. He and I became friends years ago. And he said, Mark, the key is every 7 years, kind of just reinventing yourself, right? So you got to learn new procedures. You got to meet new people. You got to take on new opportunities. And, if somebody asks you to be on the board of a foundation, you got to say yes. If somebody says, can you help me with a state meeting? You have to say yes. If the college asks, can you help? You have to say yes. Because I think that's what gives you a rewarding life and a lot of fun. And I'm having more fun now than I've ever had in my life, just because I just keep meeting more people and good people, and we have so many wonderful people in our profession, right? I was saying to somebody at ACFAS, I think if my car broke down in any city in America, I could make a phone call to somebody I know within podiatry and they would help me in a minute. You know what I mean? Because we just have that ability through what we do. So yeah, I think you have to be flexible and to listen to everything, right? Like, because a lot of us old guys and old ladies, we have a lot to offer from the standpoint of the mistakes we made, what went right, and how to avoid certain pitfalls and how to have fun doing different things. So you have to be open-minded. You got to be able to pivot. I pivoted all the time, right? Like I was, 20 some years old and still wasn't making decisions for myself, right? My dad told me not to be a football coach. Meanwhile, football coaches make like 10 million a year now. But, and then, Dr. Saskwood said, you're going to do this. And then Katz said, you're going to go do this. And my practice has sort of been that way too. I started out in private practice first when everybody said it was impossible to do back then. And then, and I moonlighted, while I was getting started. And then I became part of the faculty at West Penn and, first at the Podiatry Hospital, the residency, and then at West Penn. And then I was asked to go into that orthopedic group. And there were a couple of guys there, the two senior joint guys, they became like fathers to me. So they really, really mentored me. Scott Barrett and Tom Brockmeyer, those people really gave me the opportunity. I don't think that the fellowship would have ever come along if it wasn't for them and that opportunity, and I'm not going to lie to you, when I did that opportunity, I took a little bit of a pay cut because it was a risk I was taking because I thought it was going to, at that time I was the first podiatrist in the state of Pennsylvania to work for an orthopedic group that had never been done before. And so I took a risk to try to make things better for myself, and it worked because then my income went up, fivefold after that. So I've always been malleable and willing to take a chance. And then when this job came, I never thought that I would see the kind of pathology that I saw at the orthopedic group in Pittsburgh. And I was nervous about coming to WVU because I had built that over 17 years. And what I'm seeing here now and the cases we're doing now, even make that look like nothing. So I've just continued to try to keep it going. And you have to be flexible, I think, to do that and willing to take a risk a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Mark, where are you in this 5-year or 7-year cycle right now?
So I'm 2.5 years into reinventing myself here at WVU. And I probably have one more to go because, like I said, I'm 61, but I'm really, really having a lot of fun. So I don't want to quit. I'm going to try to go till I'm 68 or 70, as long as I'm healthy and still having a good time. Here at WVU, people don't know, but for years, West Virginia has always finished either 48th, 49th, or 50th in healthcare in America. And the new folks that are running WVU, so WVU, if I'm not mistaken, owns about 19 hospitals in the state of West Virginia. We have 2 in Ohio, 1 in Pennsylvania, and 1 in Maryland. And their idea is they want us to start training people well and keeping them here in the state to take care of West Virginia people, which is a really, really cool model, And so I spend the majority of my time practicing, but I also am medical director of foot and ankle here and then run the fellowship. And so, I have an administrative part of my day. I have a practice part, a surgical part. And so I really am enjoying that. I've never really done anything administrative before. So I'm in that phase now. And at some point, we're really building a nice faculty here. We brought my old fellow, Crystal Bradshaw, back, who had trained at MedStar in Georgetown, and she's with me now. And then we just stole Pat Burns away from UPMC. So the two of them are going to run the residency while I run the fellowship. And they're just two incredible people to spend my day with every day. They're both brilliant. They keep me on my toes. And so I don't know, I'm in that phase. I don't know what's going to be the last 7 years or not, but I'm about 2.5 years into this next 7-year cycle. Yeah.
That's great, especially with starting the residency program. Then you'll have students running around and
right.
it'll be invigorating.
Exactly. Yeah. It should be fun. Yes. So
can we go back to your AO fellowship that you've commented on a couple times? Tell us a little bit about that experience and what that was like.
So Joe, it's probably hard for people to believe, but back then, we didn't have cell phones really. We didn't have, you didn't do a whole lot on the internet or anything like that. I had never been to Europe before. I didn't have a credit card. We paid for everything in cash and a check back then. And so Dr. Transright said to me, you got to be in Berlin on February 1st. And I'd never even purchased a plane ticket to go to Europe. And so my folks helped me. I got a ticket. I had a big American Tourister leather bag and I just took off, and I didn't even have money in my pocket to buy food when I got there. And I had not even thought about how I was going to get from the airport to the hospital. And so what happened was I had a layover in Belgium, and this real gruffly guy on the plane said, what are you doing and where are you heading? And I said, I'm heading to Berlin, to do a fellowship. And he said, how you get to the hospital? And I said, I have no idea. And so we got off the plane. He took me to a hotel. He said, be on the front step tomorrow morning at 7:00. I went out on the front step at 7:00. He picked me up. He took me to the hospital, dropped me off and said, good luck to you. And the first day I was there, I couldn't even eat because I didn't have a credit card and I didn't have cash because, I was getting paid once I got there in German marks. So it was a real learning experience for me, and then, I didn't speak the language.
Yeah.
And so that was actually kind of fun because, they tried to talk to me and what they knew and I talked to them. But it was really, really amazing from the standpoint of how different medicine was there than it was in Pittsburgh at the time when I was training. And so, but I think it was the relationships really more than anything. I mean, I spent years going back and forth to lecture for the German Foot Surgery Foundation. They ultimately started sending some of their people to train with me at Podiatry Hospital Pittsburgh, so they would send people over to learn foot and ankle surgery. And then we just grew on it. We've done an enormous number of meetings. I just chaired a meeting in France this past October. And so, and I met their families. They would have me to their house for dinner. And then when I had to leave there and go to Switzerland, one of the chiefs at the hospital, his wife got my train ticket, called ahead and said, this is how you're going to do it. She said, you're going to get on the train here and you're going to get off here. And that's how I got to Switzerland. So again, it was just so many people helping me, but being willing to just say yes and take a risk. And it was neat. I wouldn't give it up for the world. I'm really, really glad I did it. Yeah. So, and I did crazy cases, Joe, I remember one of the first days I was there, a road worker got hit by a plow on a snowy day and basically disarticulated him at the ankle. The only thing that was left was his Achilles, and we reconstructed him. And I mean, honestly, back in the late 80s and early 90s, podiatrists weren't doing a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And the one hospital I was at in Switzerland was Region Hospital, was a trauma center. And so, where I learned to do my calc fractures and my ankle fractures and my pilons was there. As just a young guy trying to find my way around Europe, because they just did so much of it at those places because it was an AO trauma fellowship.
Yeah.
So that was a blessing for me too, right? Because I don't think if I wouldn't have done that, I probably would have never ended up at that orthopedic group, would have never ended up at WVU. So it all kind of lines up for a reason, So
Yeah.
that was great. Had a good time. So,
Mark, listening to you talk, I hear such gratitude for everybody that kind of paved the way before you. But I loved how you say you never say no. What's your thoughts on work-life balance?
Yeah. So I was just never raised that way, Jeff. You know what I mean? I started my day-to-day at 7:30 case. I did 2 cases in another hospital. It's 6:32 West Virginia time. And I still got to stop at a funeral home on the way home and get home. So like my days are always, up at 5 home. And I always read. I do a ton of reading. So I read late into the night. So I've never understood the work-life balance thing. But then again, I know it's important today to people, but I will tell you, I think one of my friends, Larry D. Domenico, that I do a lot of stuff with, he always says, Hoff, to most people, it's a job. To you, it's been a career. So for me, like doing something like this tonight, this isn't, I don't look at this as delaying me from getting home. It's just part of my career. It's what I do. And yet, having said that, I still have 3 wonderful kids and 3 wonderful grandkids. I'm leaving next Friday to go to Banff to ski for a week. I have a wonderful life. I play golf. You can do all that. But I've never understood the work-life balance thing. Now, having said that, you can't burn yourself out. And I've gone through that phase too. But I solved that problem. There's a balance there. But, I think when you're young, you got to take the time to build it. You got to do the right things, right? You got to shake hands. You got to hug babies. You got to do some stuff maybe you don't want to do. But that's what lets you, do what you want for the rest of your life, and nobody ever said that 3 years of residency and fellowship were going to be easy. It's not meant to be, right? You never get those years back, right? And so this idea of like stopping at 44 hours or whatever it is, I was just getting rolling in the late 80s at 44 hours, and so, but everybody's looking for something different. Maybe my goals were different than other people, and I don't think we should ever tell anybody what their goals should be, but I think that these 3 years of residency and that year of fellowship are so vital. It's 4 years out of your life when you're in your early 30s, and it can just do so much for you until you're 70 or 80. So I look at it a little bit differently. I understand some people, especially, more and more people today coming through have families already. Some of my fellows have 2 and 3 kids already. So you do need some work-life balance there, right? Because you got to get home to your husband or to your wife. You got to be there. But you got to make the most of those 4 years of school, the 3 years of residency, and that year of fellowship, I think,
Well said. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We've talked a couple times with different guests about the idea that every yes, to your point of like, say yes, is also inherently a no to something else.
Yes.
And so
true.
Everything's a trade-off.
Yes, that's true. Well, and you know what, Joe? So let's go there for a second if we could,
Yeah.
right? So having said that, and where we're going down with this discussion now, right? I always say, like when I speak at the fellows meetings or the residence meetings, I always ask everybody, what do you think the most important decision in your life is? When people say, well, where I go to college or what profession I go into or where I do my residency or should I do a fellow or should I not? And none of those are as important as if you pick the right significant other the first time, right? Because if you go into this field that we go in and you do the type of things that we're doing, right? You have to have someone that understands that, right? So because I'm running late today, it was my own fault with you guys, right? I was late in the OR the whole bit. I called home and told my lady friend, hey, I'm probably not going to be home for a while. And she said, no problem. I'll get things started. In the first part of my life wasn't like that. because I made the wrong decision early. And that's, I think, what prevents people from doing what they want to do and having happiness. And so I think it's really, really important that your significant other is on the same page. And you got to pick somebody that understands maybe what your goals are, because it can be tough if you don't. And I see a lot of things kind of go off the rails because of that, and that's something that we never, right? Like your parents don't talk about that. Your chemistry professor doesn't talk to you about that. Your residency director doesn't talk about that. And then next thing you know, you wake up and you're 35 and you have that. And you're like, oh no, now what? And so I think those things are important, right? They always say behind every successful woman is a supportive husband, right? Or vice versa. And I think that that's important if you want to do the kind of things we're doing,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was having a conversation with a student just today about, trying to figure out externships and where to go and how do I even begin narrowing down this search? There's all these different programs and
right.
To that point, right? Like, I have this mindset and this career that I want to build. And one of the things that I said to the student was, a big factor in this is if you're taking someone with you, right? And that can translate on lots of different levels. But is there someone that you're bringing with you on this journey? Because they're important. And that doesn't mean you're going to revolve all decisions around that person, but they are part of it. And it's okay to have them as part of it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Joe, one of the things that I do see, I'm upbeat and positive, but one of the things I'm starting to worry about a little bit lately is, and Jeff, to your point, I think too many kids today are picking programs based on the work-life balance and is it close to where they live or where they want to live instead of where am I going to get the best training? And because I think a lot of times you wake up 2 or 3 years in it and you say, man, that I picked the wrong place for me, And so I understand that a lot of that type of stuff is important, right? But if you're from Houston and the best program for you is in West Virginia, then you can knock 3 years out of your life to come to West Virginia to then go to Houston and have a wonderful career for the rest of your life, right? And so I think that we should get back more to focusing on what's the best program for me, not what's the best part of the country for me to live in, or what's the best program for me to get home at 4 and hit golf balls. That it just doesn't work out for you in the long run,
Yeah.
No,
and I think, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, well said. I mean, here in Arizona, we have a small class, Mark. We only have 40 students, right? So we're constantly encouraging them to get out and see what the country has to offer, whether you're in Florida or Washington or Ohio or Pennsylvania or West Virginia. I mean, there's so many great opportunities. If you do the right program for the right reasons, you're going to have all the options you want going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you might find, right, that you think you want to be in Idaho, but you end up in Atlanta and you're like, wow, I never knew this existed, Yeah, absolutely.
Joe, I did not mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, basically the same thing. So just mirroring and so let's keep on this line then. In terms of if you were to go back at any point in your life, Mark, in a part where you felt like you needed some advice,
yes,
what would you tell yourself? Like, and it could be any time. Like, what would the advice be that you would give to a younger version of yourself?
Yeah, so it's interesting, Joe. So the biggest regret I don't have many regrets because I've been lucky and everything happens for a reason. But if you said to me, Hoff, you only got 3 days left to live, what are you doing? I'm grabbing my 3 daughters and my granddaughters and we're going skiing. Okay. So I love to ski. And I just had this mindset that, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I went to school in Pittsburgh. I did residency in Pittsburgh. I'm just staying in Pittsburgh. And if I would have known that I could have practiced in Colorado or Idaho or Montana, I wish now maybe I would have done that. It's a healthier life, sunshine, blue sky. So my biggest regret is that. And that was my own fault because I was just too close-minded. Now, I was fortunate that I got Pittsburgh. But I wish I would have been open-minded to maybe practice somewhere else, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of just immediately coming back to Pittsburgh. So that's one thing. We already talked a little bit. I mean, I made a decision early, when I was 33 to get married, and I probably shouldn't have done that. I probably wasn't ready for that at that time. It was probably an issue for me. So those are really the only two things that I would probably change. I will tell you, though, to be honest, the other thing that happens is I was so focused on just getting educated and trying to be good at what I do that I went a long time in my life before I ever figured out what my real worth was. And so, I make a lot more money now doing what I love than I did 20 years ago because no one ever told me what my worth was. And I probably still wouldn't to this day. When I was with the orthopedic group, our group was purchased by the hospital, and the CEO of the hospital was a very, very good friend of mine. And in my second round of negotiations, it was like the second 5 years, he said to me, Mark, your problem is you've never known what you were worth. And so I've never worried about money. I've never had money. I've never worried about money. But I wish I would have a little bit more because I think I left a lot of money on the table because I've worked hard and I think I've made a lot of other people money that maybe I could have made some of that for me. But having said that, all three of my kids are educated. Nobody has student loans. We travel. So it's a wonderful, wonderful career. And I wouldn't change much, but those are the three things I'd probably fine tune a little bit, But having said that, Joe, I mean, maybe if I would have gone to Denver, I'd have never ended up at WVU, and I'm having a blast. So having said that, things happen for a reason too, and that you've made some changes as well.
Yeah. And I think, again, kind of almost circling back to the beginning as when we were talking, this idea of being willing to take some risks. And it's the hardest thing that I have personally struggled with and watched students struggle with, right, is managing the unknown. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And it's so awkward and clunky and nobody enjoys it or wants to do it. But it's such a valuable skill to just lean into it and try to do the best you can. Like you said, at some point you take the factors. What is it that means the most to me? And how can I build the life that's going to support that? Get the very best training you possibly can. Factor in the people that matter and work the hardest you can possibly work in those parameters, right? It is that simple. It's not easy by any stretch. Is it not easy? But it is simple enough.
Yeah. And let's face it, right? The statistics show that very few people are in the same job 5 years from the first job that they started, right? Very, very rare. And so there's pluses and minuses of that too. But no, and I got some friends at the meeting this weekend. We had a fellows meeting this weekend, and a bunch of my friends were there, and they said, you're one of the only people that are still having a good time doing this. And I said, well, I think it's because some people chase different things, right? Like I've never really chased money, but if you just work hard, listen, like Kat said, if you just are good at what you do and you can be nice to people, you will make an incredible living in this. And sometimes I say to folks, how much is enough? How much do you really need? And I think everybody too thinks that the grass is always greener, right? Like, oh, I wish I was doing what Hoff was doing because he's doing all that trauma. Well, you don't know what it took to get to this point, right? And it's not all green pastures, right? I always say it's a little bit greener usually because it gets a little bit more water, right? That's the reason why. And so I think that's the other thing too, is I quit envying people a long time ago. Joe, for 35 years, I went to that ACFAS meeting, and every year I came home and I was depressed, and I said, everybody's doing better than me and making more money than me and doing more ankle fractures than me. And this year I came home from ACFAS and I said, man, I'm really lucky. I'm blessed. It takes you a while to realize how good you have it, and I always tell everybody, it's the journey, man. It really, really is. Like my friends who are in their 40s now, that are going through some of those bumps, I just laugh and say, listen, the kids will be out of school soon. This will all be behind you. But it's the journey. Like when I look back, some of that stuff that I really thought was hard on me or, obviously I wouldn't want to go through it again. But you go through that stuff for a reason, right? So you come out on the other end a lot better.
Yeah.
And so, but it can be tough. My mom always said, I never promised you a rose garden. And it's true. You get a lot of thorns along the way, man,
Definitely.
But in our profession, you got to admit, there's a lot of wonderful people. There aren't too many people in our profession that I wouldn't go have a beer with or help on a case or, it's, because we got a small knit community, right? Like we're a small profession. We kind of all know each other.
Yeah.
And so I think it's great.
Yeah.
So fun. So Mark, I have a question, a little off track here a little, but I know you're a big skier. What are your 5 favorite places to ski?
So far, I really, really love Sun Valley, Idaho. That was always a bucket list trip for me, and I did that a few years ago with the kids. I love the Big Sky, Montana. Before Christmas, I took my granddaughter out to Alta. Alta's a fun one if you're a skier because they don't let ski boarders there, so it's kind of neat. I actually have a place, Jeff, on my bucket list, not this August, but next August. I'm going to ski in Chile in South America.
Wonderful.
Because, their winter is our summer, And then I have one other bucket list thing. I've always wanted to go to a Winter Olympics. And the Winter Olympics 2 years from this month is going to be in the Dolomites of Italy, where my ancestry is from. And so I'm going to go there to the Olympics and ski. So those are probably, although I will tell you, have you skied Mammoth in California?
I have not. I practiced in Colorado for many years. So we kind of stayed in Colorado.
Yeah. Well, I love it all, right? I'd go anywhere you wanted to go, but Mammoth is awesome too. I think just that idea of beautiful blue skies and crisp air, and it's awesome.
So if you go back to Mammoth, Mark, you let me know. My best friend lives in Mammoth, and she is the ultimate Mammoth person. So you let me know, and I will connect you, and she will take good care of you.
All right, sounds good.
Such a small world.
Yeah, it's awesome. But Jeff, my passion is cooking.
Okay.
That's my real passion. So that's what I love to do the most.
So what's your what kind of food?
Anything you would want. I'll do anything. Yeah. Like every night of my life, I go home and I cook a nice meal for myself and have the kids over all the time on the weekends. I really, really enjoy cooking. Yeah.
I love it.
And you also are quite the reader, right, Mark?
Yeah, I like to read a lot about history. I'm reading my second biography right now on Napoleon. I got a man crush on Napoleon right now. When I was in France in October, you just learn so much about Napoleon. And I never, we kind of get the English perspective that he was a bad guy and a tyrant, but the people of France love him. And when you look at the things he did for the world, a lot of the things from governmental standpoint or whatever today, those were all things that were formed by Napoleon. And I've been reading a lot about him lately, but I love history, Joe. Reading is I just, kids are all gone. So I took one of the kids' bedrooms and I turned it into a beautiful, like old antique library. So I'm just slowly but surely filling that thing with books right now. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah.
That's incredible.
And I know at one of the ACFAS wellness type things, you had a reading list that had some books that I have read and I'm very familiar with. But what would you say is one of the most influential books, non-podiatry, that you've read, or non-medical, we'll say? Yeah.
So I think that every person coming out of podiatry school or residency, the first book they should read is The Richest Man in Babylon. You really, really got to read that one, I think. The book Die with Zero is an incredible book, whether you're young or old. I think those are really important. I think in today's society where I think we don't love each other as much as we used to, and we don't respect as much as we used to, I think George Washington's Rules of Civility is a book that everybody should read because, I always tell the fellow, maybe it's not important to you that that you use the fork furthest from the left to eat your salad, but when you're having lunch with the CEO and she's trying to determine whether you're going to be chief of surgery or not, maybe it's important to her, right? I think it's important that you learn to open a door for a woman and let, the senior person at the table sit first. Those are things that we've gotten away from. And so that book, I think, is really, really awesome. There's a book called necessary endings. And it's about, whether it's in business or your personal life or whatever, kind of knowing when to pivot and move on to the next thing instead of getting left behind. And so, and anything from Malcolm Gladwell, from the standpoint of, after reading his books, I look at our literature differently, right? Because you can make numbers look like a lot of things. But his books are really, really good, like Tipping Point, What the Dog Saw, Outliers. Those books are all very, very good, make you think differently. Yeah. And Think and Grow Rich, right? Everybody's got to read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich at least one time. Even if all you do is think and don't get rich, you still get it.
Think and then live your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Think and die with zero. That's the key.
There you go. There you go.
So I have a last question for me, Mark. What would you tell a college student that's contemplating a career in podiatric medicine?
I'll tell you, it's been the greatest thing in the world for me. I'm so glad that Dr. Staskowitz told me to do it. When I think now, I think, Jeff, if I would have been a dentist, I think I would have been miserable. Because let's face it, right? In dentistry, it's a little bit monotonous, right? It's your patients really can't talk to you that much. And on any given day, I mean, how many different procedures are you going to be able to do, right? And for me, I open up that door every day and I walk in and there could be an ankle fracture, a calcaneal fracture, a foreign body, a terrible infection, a limb loss case. Every day it's different for us, right, Joe? I mean, every day it's different. And we get to go in an operating room and open people up every day. I don't know. I love podiatry. It's probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And I would tell them to find someone positive and visit them, or do more of this type of thing. Like reach out to Joe, reach out to you, and find out what it's like. Spend a little bit of time looking into it. We're really doing a lot of that here in West Virginia. Reaching out, we're doing suture workshops. We're trying to visit health clubs and start health societies within schools. We're trying to really let kids know, because let's be honest, we have done a poor job of letting people know about our profession. And I will tell you too, I think, obviously we never talk about money, right? It's kind of, not supposed to do that. But I think that that's probably where we've kind of made a mistake as well, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm almost embarrassed of the money that I make. And when I do a lot better than a lot of the other specialties here. And I got a wonderful life, and so I think it's a great profession and people ought to look into it. And, we have these things published all the time, like where people practice and what kind of money do they make and what kind of practice do they have. And, that may be 20 or 30% of it, but there's 70% of us that are living a completely different life than that.
Yeah.
But I think the key to podiatry too, right, Jeff, is you can have whatever you want, right? If you want to be a wife and have 3 kids and do primary care medicine and work 9 to 3, you can do that, right? If your passion is diabetic limb salvage and you just want to do wounds, you can do that, right? But if you want to be crazy like me and try to fix people falling out of windows and stuff like that, you can do that too. You can pick whatever you want to pick. And so even within such a small profession, we got so many options, right? You want to teach, you want to be a dean, you want to do reviews. There's so much you can do. You can do medical legal work, I don't think people know all that's involved in podiatry,
Like Irv Canet used to say, it's not a job, it's a position and a profession.
Yes, what a wonderful man. Yeah. Kern was my second choice.
It was, I went to Kern out of California back in 91. I graduated, and similar to your experience in Pittsburgh, my time at Kern changed my life and the trajectory of my career,
Yeah. I mean, just think of all the wonderful people up there and what they did up, the pioneering work done up there. An amazing, amazing place. I mean, at that time, right, Kern and Pittsburgh were kind of, inner city hospital, clinics to take care of people, right? Like all the stuff that nobody was doing. Yeah, and he had so much to do with that, probably everything to do with that, right? Yeah.
So I have a funny story for you. When I was in Miami, I asked Dr. Cannett to come down and do the commencement speech for the graduation. And of course, he said, of course. But what we did is we planned the night before he was going to come down and do a CME, and we invited all the podiatrists in Miami to come listen to the history of podiatric medicine. And we lost the CD, Mark. I mean, Irv's family didn't have it. Kaplan's didn't have it. Kern, went through its sale and all that kind of stuff. And then my wife, about 6 weeks ago, sent me a text with a picture, and she had found Irv's CD.
Oh, wow. I bet you that'd be great to go back and look at.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert it to digital, and I'm going to make it into one of these podcasts with his lecture.
Oh, that's great.
So
that's great.
Irv was a true leader. You're right. And I feel privileged to have been able to work under him for sure.
Yep. Yeah, great guy. He had actually, after my career got going, he actually invited me. I went up and spoke at the Great Lakes meeting a couple of times. And he's a good man. Yeah.
Great Lakes meeting was this past weekend.
Oh, was it really?
Yep. And Joe, you'll like this. 2 of our students gave talks there because they're residents up in Michigan right now. Yeah.
That's great.
So it's such a small profession, Mark. Golly, thanks for all you do and all the connections.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful opportunity to meet you and spend time talking today. Thank you.
It was great. Appreciate it.
And
thank you.
I love your quote too from Al, and I'm going to steal it. Be good at what you do and be kind.
Yeah.
Doesn't get easier than that. Yep.
Absolutely.
I love it.
A whole lot of common sense going on there, huh?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, to everybody out there that's listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating. And of course, if you're on YouTube, you please become a subscriber. But Mark, before we take off, I want to let you know we're going to send you one of these Dean's Chat cups.
Awesome.
And, you can handle anything you like to drink at any time of the day. Just throw that out there.
Excellent, because I'm always drinking my tea every day. And my the lady in my office who handles all the DME, for Christmas, she gave me a mug, and it said, all I ever wanted to do was teach biology and coach football. Because every time we're having a bad day, I say that. And so she reminded me. So I'll swap that out for this new cup. That'll be perfect.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sounds good. I had one other question for you. Were you a Packer fan? Is that why you wanted to play for the Packers?
No. So I've been a season ticket holder of the Steelers since I was 11 years old. But what happened was my father, he was a football coach, like as his side job. He owned a business, but he loved to coach. And I had to read everything that Vince Lombardi wrote. And so, back then in the late 60s and the early 70s, everything was the Green Bay Packers and everything was Vince Lombardi. And so that's where that came from. I still have all of Vince Lombardi's books. But I think that Vince Lombardi helped me get the Podiatry Hospital in Pittsburgh residency program, because one of the questions I was asked at the CRIP in Miami, one of the docs said to me, what's your definition of being on time? And Vince Lombardi said, be where you're supposed to be 10 minutes before you're supposed to be there. And as I get older, I have a harder time keeping that part of the deal, Joe. But when I was young, I was always where I was supposed to be 10 minutes before I was supposed to be there. So, but I think that's why I was just so hooked on the Green Bay Packers, was because of Vince Lombardi.
A timeless figure in the world of sports and life, I think.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks again, Mark. And cheers, everybody. We look forward to talking again in the future. Bye-bye, Joe.
Bye. Thanks so much, Mark.
Bye, Mark.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.